In episode 7 of season 3, Bernard hands Juliette a journal 140 years old and has one of the Flamekeepers read the last entry out loud. The name of the man who kept it goes past once and disappears under everything else in the room. His name was Mission Jones, and in Hugh Howey's books, he gets a fifth of the novel Shift, his own friends, his own birthday, his own death, which the show describes very differently from the way it happened. He also carries the one piece of evidence that the Great Uprising, the event every character in Wool grew up in the shadow of, was never really an uprising. Full spoilers ahead. Let's go back 140 years and watch somebody switch it on. Silo 18 had a saying about the way a life gets made. Death days were birthdays. That's what they said to ease their pain, those who were left behind. An old man dies, a lottery number gets pulled, and a couple who have waited years are finally allowed a child. So one life always had to be bought with another. Nobody understood that arithmetic better than Mission Jones, because no number was ever pulled for him. His mother's implant failed, the way 1 in 10,000 did, and rather than report it, she hid the pregnancy under loose clothes until it was past the date the Pact allowed a child to be treated as a cyst. After that date, the Pact had one trade left in it. Mission was allowed to live. His mother was sent out to clean, and she never came back. He was turning 17, and his birthday was the anniversary of her death, so he walked toward it every year thinking about dying and celebrating nothing. He worked as a porter, which is the best job in that buried world for seeing how the place runs, because porters climb its entire height and know where everything goes. Down in dispatch, a ledger was kept under lock and key, written by hand so the information couldn't slip off into wires, tracking certain kinds of pipe, brass, fluids and powders out of chemical, and rope. Order too much rope, and you went on a list. It seemed strange to him that if you ordered enough to hang yourself, nobody cared. Enough to span a few levels, and eyebrows were raised. Mission thought about that more often than a young man should, and every time he did, he adjusted the kerchief around his neck. That year the silo was coming apart quietly and almost politely. Farmers had set up stalls at their own gates and were selling around the shops. The cafeteria up top had started its own sprouts, and dispatch was running bean trestles along a wall, because everyone had decided their own supply was safer than a shared one. And that same week, the farmers lowered a generator down the stairwell on a rope at night to avoid paying the porters, so the porters came up through the dark and cut it, with Mission's knife, the night before his birthday. Mission got somewhere dangerous on that rail. If every group was working to need nobody else, it was hard to see how that helped any of them get along. Which brings us to level 9, and to the one person here who knew exactly what she was doing. Above that door, instead of a level number, somebody had painted the Crow's Nest. Behind it sat Mrs. Crow, who had run the school for the upper levels longer than anyone alive could remember, moving around her classroom in an electric chair built decades earlier by a student long dead. That morning she showed Mission a bandage and complained that doctors had come and taken half her blood, and when he laughed and said they were looking out for her, she answered that she didn't trust them. Then she washed the thought down with a mouthful of the vile vegetable pulp she preferred over water. Mission brought her cucumbers and peppers from the farms for those drinks. Hold on to the drink, it comes back. Then she told the children about the old time. Blue skies, green hills, a drowned city called Atlantis, under posters reading, "You can be anything," and "Go new places." These fantastic tales of a better place left Mission angry at the world he lived in. The promise of an elsewhere highlighted the flaws of the familiar. What she was cultivating in those children was the exact offense that Silo sent people outside to clean for. On the morning of his birthday, the Crow gave Mission an envelope for Rodney, his closest friend from childhood, who had gone off to shadow in IT. He opened it on the way, in a conference room on 34, while teenagers around him filled out applications, and found a line of a nursery rhyme in chalk. Soon, soon, the mama bird sings, "Take flight, take flight." It was a signal rather than a letter, and Mission missed it. What he did catch was the room, because noticing was his profession. IT was hiring technicians by the row that day. The men barking instructions were security, and none of those boys knew anything about computers. Then Rodney was brought out from behind a steel door with the servers ranked behind it, unshaven and visibly unslept, and offered a handshake instead of a hug, pressing a folded scrap of paper into Mission's palm. 2 turns of the staircase later, Mission opened it. "Help me." On his way out, the head of IT stopped him and offered 200 chits, a month's pay, to carry a package up from supply without going through dispatch. Mr. Wick called him the Zero, because no lottery number had ever been pulled for him, and then wished him a happy birthday that Mission had never mentioned to him. Mission said he'd think about it. Cam took the job, the friend he'd hauled a body up to the farms with that same morning. A few hours later, the package went off on 116. The landing tore away from the great spiral staircase and dropped into the depths with people on it, and Mission, leaning past the rail, watched them cartwheel through the air. Then somebody above started screaming that a porter had done it, because the blue kerchief on his neck was the one they'd seen on Cam. To be precise, the book never shows us Cam's body. The certainty that he died is Mission's own. Below, lower dispatch was burning, because the farmers had come for the beans and set it alight. Roker, the porter's chief, was under a sheet in the corner, and Hackett lay in the water with half his face burned away. And in the sorting room, Joel pulled the lid off a bin and lifted out a brand new set of white security coveralls. There were dozens in there, sent down from Garment days before any of this began, and nobody could work out why anyone had made so many. That's the first piece of evidence in this story, and Mission is standing next to it without seeing it. To see it, we have to go somewhere Mission can never go. Same year, 2212, different building. In Silo 1, a man named Donald is pulled out of cryo, and Anna Thurman tells him plainly that 18 is going to burn itself to the ground, and her father would rather pull the plug on it. Donald learns 3 things from the elder Thurman, and each explains something we have already watched. First, the pills they hand out are empty, and the drug has been in the water all along. Donnie, the medication is in the water. And people stop taking the pills only after their memory has started coming back, and the worse the trauma, the better the medication works. Second, reset is the name of a procedure with steps. Reduce the population, wipe the computers, wipe their memories, run the place again, which they have already done to 18 several times. Third is the formula they light it with. The combustibles are always there. You'd be surprised at how few sparks it takes. Thurman then admits the reset has been running the whole time Donald has been awake, that the head of 18 took on the new recruits and sowed the discord himself. And asked how it's going, he describes the bombs and the groups in different colors warring with each other. Everything Mission has lived through gets summarized upstairs as a status report. That leaves Donald one job: find the one person in 10,000 who remembers. Instead of months of profiles and arrest records, he did something simpler. He searched the database for a copy of himself. Afraid of doctors and therefore never seen by one, refusing medication, and, the book's own words, he found one who did not even trust the water. He expected a furious young rebel with a network behind him, and got an old woman in an electric chair who taught children to sing and drank green sludge instead of water. The blood those doctors took sits 2 chapters from Thurman, explaining that they sample anyone with a resistance to the drug, and the book lets you put that together yourself. Then came the radio call. Thurman raised 18 and asked for Wick, but the one who answered was the silo head's shadow, which is to say, Rodney. They put sensors on his headset reading pulse and skin, and Thurman worked him the way a very good sergeant works a difficult recruit. You've been fed the truth. and now you see why the truth must be divvied out carefully or not at all." Rodney wept. The jagged lines settled into steel cords, and Thurman let go of the button. "He's ready." They gave the boy his first order, and riding back to the lift, Thurman remarked that in time this Rodney would make a fine silo head, better than the last one. Mission knows none of this, and at that moment he is 30 levels below the friend he still believes he is climbing up to rescue. The woman on the stairwell told everyone that a porter set that bomb, and by evening, every checkpoint in the silo is watching for a young man in porter blue. So 2 porters he trusts zip him into a body bag and carry him up as freight, because a sealed bag is the one load in that silo that nobody asks to open. The dead are very nearly as taboo as the outside. He pays them every chit he owns, all 384, and one of them works the zipper up over his face, kisses her fingers and touches his forehead the way priests bless the dead. "May your steps rise to the heavens." And there, strapped still in the dark under somebody else's shoulders, he remembers what the kerchief covers. 2 years earlier to the day, he had tried to hang himself from the pipes in mechanical, and the knot slid instead of holding and left a wheal across his throat. He had stopped fearing death long before. What still frightened him was being carried by somebody else, and he was being carried. It was the act of lying still, of being carried, of being a burden. He reaches the nest that night and finds 2 more of the crow's own already there in the green and white of farm security. Frankie, who grew up wanting to be a farmer, and Allie, the girl from the farm's mission had spent years quietly not marrying, because marrying her meant going home. They are setting out desks, every desk that had been stacked under sheets in storage, while the crow sits in her chair and sings. They tell him the farms were attacked, and that Riley, his 12-year-old brother, begged to go and fight, was told no, disappeared, and was found with a kitchen knife still in his hands. The crow doesn't ask about the fighting. She asks whether Rodney has done it yet, and explains that her note was there to give the boy strength and tell him it was time to begin. The door opens and Rodney walks in white, freshly shaved, creases still in his coveralls, a gun in his hand. And he says the thing this whole story exists to deliver. These sayings on the wall, the stories and songs, "You made us what we are. You made us angry." The crow points at the empty desks and tells him it will go the way it always goes, that they'll wipe it clean and bury and burn the dead, and these desks will be full again. Frankie lunges. Mission throws himself sideways, and the first round goes into his stomach, while the second and third go into the crow. He lies there with Allie's hands pressed on his belly, wanting to tell her everything at once, that she'd been right, that they'd have had children and a joined plot of soil and long rows of corn running out across the generations. He gets out one thing. All that came out, a whisper amid the din of boots and shouts, was that today was his birthday. Mission lived. 3 years later, he is washing planting dirt off his hands on a farm, working a wedding ring off a swollen knuckle, listening to Allie open the oven on a roast they can't afford without an occasion. There is one, and it's that she's pregnant. The first thing he feels is relief rather than joy, because the doctor says it happened inside their window and the whole thing is legal. A man whose mother died for an unauthorized pregnancy checks the paperwork before he lets himself be happy. They pick names over dinner. A girl will be Allison. A boy, Mission says, should be Cam. Allie asks whether that was his grandfather's name. "No, I don't know any Cams. I just like the way it sounds." He has a scar on his stomach and a mark on his neck, and no memory of getting either, and he cannot remember his own birthday, which drives him quietly mad, because what could possibly be difficult about that? The drug was in the water, and after a reset they changed the formulation. So the show closes Mission's journal with a suicide. The book closes it with something heavier. The man lived, forgot all of it, and the entries stop exactly where the person writing them stopped remembering that he wrote them. So what does Mission Jones do to the Silo saga? In Wool, Holston's wife Allison pulls deleted reports off the servers and works out that uprisings came around once a generation, like clockwork, for the better part of 2 centuries, and that after the Great One there hasn't been a single one since. Mayor Johns puts the distance plainly from outside a holding cell. Our records don't go back to the beginning, you know. They don't go back before the uprising a century and a half ago. Now you know what ended it. In 2212, they removed one old woman who had spent generations telling children the world could be something else, and the uprisings stopped. And Bernard, the same Bernard who carries that journal to Juliette in episode 7, tells Lucas in the book that the last uprising was far worse than this one, that the damage got welded back together afterward, and that the people were made to forget.